things coming up. But now I'd like to turn the table a little bit and tell you about our speaker for today, Dr. Maria Murray Riemann, Executive Director of WomenNC for the last 3 years. She's a seasoned nonprofit executive who has worked in the areas of education, youth, and children's-oriented organizations in their leadership roles. She has also worked in state government, serving as Deputy Director of the North Carolina Council for Women and Youth Involvement, the state agency which is tasked with advising the governor, legislature, and state agencies on issues that impact women. As a scholar, Dr. Riemann's work has focused on the importance of families, particularly the role of women and mothers in creating the conditions for a robust political democracy. As an advocate, she is a former board member of the North Carolina chapter of UN Women and connecting local women and their concerns to the international women's movements. We are delighted to have you with us today, Dr. Riemann, and look forward to hearing from you. We hope that you will also give us permission to share this recording on our YouTube channel. So for those folks who missed it, we'd like to further extend your message today, and appreciate you being here. I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Great. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate this opportunity. I always say for the last couple of years, I'm trying to retire the tagline. Ready for my tagline that I'm trying to retire? WomenNC. We're the most interesting nonprofit you've never heard of. And I say that with a smile on my face, but the ability and the invitation that you all provided to me is in service to my retiring that tagline. I'm devoted to this organization. I've been executive director for a couple of years, but I was a volunteer and a board member before that. And I'm sure some of you have similar experiences with being motivated by the mission of the organization, and that is certainly me. So many thanks for the opportunity to tell you about what we do. I thought I'd tell you how I want to proceed. And so you can just, I always like to let people know it's part of what I used to do when I lectured to college students. So I want to tell you first about what we do. Then I want to tell you about where we are geographically and where we want to go. I then want to tell you about who we collaborate with, and as a part of that, why you might want to collaborate with us moving forward. So that's my plan, and I'm going to do so. We just recently, about 17 days ago, launched our new website, which, if you've ever done that, still has some problems, but I think does a pretty good job of telling you all who we are. And rather than do slides, which I have my doubts about whether we should look at any more PowerPoint slides, in the same way we're probably all wondering if we should do yet another Zoom meeting. So in service to that, as well as I'm not very good at it, I thought I might share my screen and have you take a look at, and as I speak, take a look at our website, which will kind of serve as an alternate to looking at PowerPoint slides. So I'm going to share my screen for a minute. Let's see if I can do this well. Can you see the homepage of my website, everybody? And I will try, I think I can. I don't know why it says edit site. I really don't understand. I'm too old to understand the intricacies of technology, but you can't edit my site, but I can. So this is our new website, and this is our new mission statement that our board of directors came up with several months ago. We empower the next generation to advance gender equality in North Carolina. And I think that mission statement is important because I said the first thing I wanted to do was tell you about what we did or what we do. We have 3 programs, the most important of which, the one that draws most of our board members and supporters, is our leadership training program. And it has a local to global focus. What we do is we work with undergraduate students from area universities And here, little advertisement. Right now, while we call ourselves WomenNC, we tend to be very triangle focused. And one of my missions as ED is to move us beyond the triangle. We've made some forays, but one of the reasons I'm interested in talking to you all is because we do have aspirations and always have to be a statewide organization. Okay, back to our first program that empowers the next generation to advance gender equality in North Carolina. We work with undergraduate students from universities that have included in the past Bennett College as well as UNCG in sort of more your neck of the woods. And we pair our undergraduate scholars up one-on-one with what we call, back to Kate's thought, or maybe it was Susan's at the beginning of the program, with femtors from RTI's Global Gender Center. Femtor, you say? What the heck is a femtor? Well, like many organizations committed to social justice, we have come to realize the inadequacy of some of our language to really be gender inclusive. So mentors, we have morphed into femtors. So we pair our undergraduate scholars up. Oh, another thing I should let you know, if you knew us 5 years ago, we didn't have WomenNC scholars. We had WomenNC fellows. We thought that wasn't such a good idea either. So we now have WomenNC scholars who are paired up with social science researchers from RTI's Global Gender Center in the Park. And together, they work on crafting a research project that examines gender inequalities in particular North Carolina communities. And then works to craft some short-term, low-cost policy solutions to improve the status quo, and then advocates for those policy solutions in front of what I call on the screen change makers. So that might mean going in front of a city council. It might mean going in front of a school board. It also does mean every year for the last 11 years, going to the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, the annual convention that's held in New York each year, the last 3 years and this year too, to be held virtually, to present the problems that we find in North Carolina, the solutions we develop, and talk with our global colleagues and learn from them, offering up some solutions that might work for us, that might work for them, and doing the reciprocal as well, listening to some of the ways in which similar gender disparities, gender discrimination takes place across the globe. And that's been a very eye-opening experience for many of our undergraduate students, many of whom have never traveled to New York. I would probably wager that none of them before they worked with us had ever been to CSW, the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations. So we like to think of ourselves as a local to global focused leadership training program. So that's the first program, the one that we spend a great deal of time on, the one that's the most long-lived of our programs, and as I say, the one that tends to attract the most interest. But I also want to talk about 2 other initiatives, and here we have the initiatives. Oh, it's not letting me do this. Oh, there we are. So I just spoke about leadership training. We also have started recently, the last 18 months, a community education initiative, which in the era of COVID means Zoom Lunch and Learn, something which I think you all are very familiar with. And what we do there is we invite change makers, advocates, people with substantive content matter expertise to talk about issues of concern that our constituency tells us they want to learn more about. Let me tell you most recently about our most recent, we call them lunch and learns, not very creative. Our most recent one, which we also call critical conversations, was a discussion about LGBTQ plus access to healthcare. And we had a Durham a state legislator from Durham, Vernetta Alston, join us. We had a former WomenNC scholar who worked on this issue when she worked with us. She's now up at Harvard. We also, I guess you can't really see this, sorry, I'm so bad with technology, but We had the outreach coordinator from PFLAG Charlotte, who works to educate healthcare providers about how to provide that kind of access to this community. And we also had someone from a think tank called Movement Advance, who could talk about stats and statistics and what's going on nationally as well as in the state with regard to policy and this issue. But we've had others as well, other lunch and learns that include things like Get Out the Vote. We worked with a Durham-based organization called You Can Vote, and we tried to give our constituency ways to get out to vote in the 2020 election. We've worked with the ERA-NC Alliance. As you might remember, in the fall, there was lots of movement on the ERA, particularly in our neighboring state of Virginia. And we wanted to offer up our folks in North Carolina an update on where we were in the state. So we've worked with the ERA-NC Alliance. So that's just a little bit about our second initiative that we call community education. Our third initiative is called Cities for CEDAW. And if you've ever heard of CEDAW, raise your hand virtually. I don't think I see anybody. Good. So let me tell you what it means. It means the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW. It's an international treaty that everybody but 8 countries across the globe has ratified. And guess who's one of those 8? The United States. And so we are in the good company of North Korea and some other autocracies that perhaps might be interesting to you. So we are not the first to have done this, but if we can't do it from the top down, let's do it from the bottom up. The Cities for CEDAW says, let's take the principles of this international human rights treaty and try to apply it not at the national level in the United States, but at the local cities and county level. We right now have 2 successes in the state of North Carolina, Durham City and Durham County, who have themselves adopted principles in accordance with CEDAW. And we hope to move that movement across the state. We are in conversation with the Women's Council in Greensboro to do just that. But that's another way that we are advancing gender equality across the state. So those are our 3 programs, and that's really the first part of what I want to say. Now, I can do a couple of things. I usually like to stop so that I'm not just a talking head, and ask if there are any questions or comments thus far on what I have said from the audience. And ask you can write it in the chat, but I can't read and talk at the same time. So I'd rather you unmute yourselves if you don't mind, if there is a question or a comment, and be glad to hear it. Okay, well, I will move on. And if there are questions, I should have said that at the beginning of my remarks, but I would love for you to let me know what they are and happy to expand. Now, that's the part number 1 of what we do. But let me just say a few more things about what we do and what we don't do. We are not a direct service organization. So it seems to me, unlike what you all do that provide a variety of different resources for women, we do not house homeless women, feed women or children who need food. That's not what we do. And I always think that's an important thing. I often say that to potential board members. We are not the local sexual violence prevention agency, and we're not the women's shelter. What we do, the philosophy that undergirds what we do, is that we need to have policy-oriented, long-term thinking, locally focused solutions to the particular problems that women see where they live. And so we can't say things like, yesterday we fed 100 hungry people. For those of you on boards of nonprofits, you know that that's such a sad but very impactful thing to be able to say. our work is more long-term focused. And anyway, I think that's important for you all to understand. We are training the next generation in our leadership training program to continue this work. We are educating the community with our community education initiatives to understand these issues better and advocate on behalf of them. And we work with local cities and counties, their elected officials, to understand the work that they need to do to be more gender inclusive. So anyway, I always think that's important to explain to people about what we do in the what we do kind of area. Okay, one final note about what we do. We are, and those of you who are not all that familiar with the United Nations, we hold a very important position in the United Nations. We are ECOSOC accredited. What does that mean? The Economic and Social Council of the United Nations. What this means is that we are an NGO, a non-governmental organization on the ground in North Carolina, and we act as the eyes and ears of the United Nations in North Carolina. We present reports, a lot of them from our scholars themselves, on the state of women's equality, the problems that women face across the state. We are the United Nations eyes and ears on the ground in North Carolina. We are one of only 5,000 organizations worldwide who have received this designation. The United Nations listens to us, and of that I am very proud as well. So, where do we want to go? I said we have aspirations to be a statewide organization, but truth be told, as I said, we are very triangle focused. We are a small organization, and we want to move cautiously but consciously across the state. And when I got the opportunity to speak to you all in a neighboring county, we're located, headquartered in Raleigh, in my house. Because we don't have an office. We actually don't think that's a good use of funds. And I have a command center here in downtown Raleigh. We want to move across the state, and Alamance County makes a great deal of sense. It makes a great deal of sense for a number of reasons. We don't want to go to Asheville tomorrow. That's literally too far for us. In 5 years, we might be in Asheville. But Alamance makes a great deal of sense in the same way that Durham County made a great deal of sense for us when we moved outward. You also have at least one university that might like to be a partner with us, and that is, I saw a sponsor of yours, Elon University. We'd love to have them participate in our leadership training program, much as Duke, Chapel Hill, State, Bennett College, and Meredith College have done. And so it makes a great deal of sense to say we want to move into Alamance County, and speaking to you is sort of my first attempt to do so as organizationally. We are also in conversation with reestablishing a relationship with UNCG to work to have their students become involved in the leadership training program at WomenNC. I'm learning a lot about about UNCG, well, also about WomenNC as I move forward, but really about UNCG, a university that well before my time we had an affiliation with. You probably all know this, but I didn't. They're a minority serving institution, most of whose undergraduates are on Pell Grants and receive Pell Grants. And so they are most interested in working with us, but there's a financial consideration that they are working on internally. But love to be connected. And I'm not sure, I heard somebody mention former academic. Well, that would be me too. But perhaps there are connections with Elon that we can work with together to move our work into your area. And I mean that sincerely. We would like to examine, we would like to have scholars examine issues that affect women in your county and the surrounds. We'd also like to do some lunch and learns of some of that community education initiative with you, with some of your affiliated organizations, to bring our work and the content matter expertise of the people you know to your neck of the woods. We're also, by the way, we have just recruited 2 board members from Charlotte. We're dipping our toes into Charlotte. It's a little bit far away, don't have that many connections in Charlotte, but I just want to give you a sense of what I'm trying to do as executive director, really expand the geographic reach of what I think is the important work that we do. So that's part two of yes, ma'am.
So I'm really interested in this part, Maria, so I'm just going to jump in. We had a loose connection with WomenNC several years ago. Probably early. I've been the director almost 8 years, and so it was pretty early in my tenure. And I want to say I attended one or two events as they tried to kind of spread out across the state, and we were kind of going to be a loose partner of theirs. We really would like to deepen this connection, and our board is committed to the type of work that you're doing. We would love to host some of these lunch and learns. So I'm going to toss that out there. And
wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Kate mentioned that there was a connection with our founder, who has since retired, Beth Dagan. And
right.
My sense is that was well before I even was a volunteer with WomenNC or was on the board. And so, I think this is what happens. I would guess, and I'm just going to throw this out here, we're called WomenNC, and I think in its infancy, WomenNC perhaps tried to do a little bit too much too quickly. And tried to expand the geographic footprint in a way that didn't actually make sense without significant funding. And by the way, let me congratulate you on, seriously, on the sponsors that you have, that you talked about at the beginning of this presentation. I am in awe of what you all have done on that front. And really the board, and I'm sure the executive director and Kate as the outreach director have much to do with that. And let me just tell you, I really think that's fabulous. The reach that you have, the corporate and other sponsors that you have who understand the value of your work. And I always like to be honest, we're not there yet. We are not as far along in the fundraising, what's the word everybody likes to use, journey, as you are, and kudos to you for that.
Yeah, we all know how hard that is. I'm following a path that was very generously laid before I got here. And there are really great deep ties in the community to the work that we do, and we're really very proud of that.
And you should be. I mean, to have the depth and variety from financial institutions to universities to healthcare to, it's really, as I looked at those slides, I was like, wow. So really kudos to all of you, and kudos to the community for understanding the importance of the work you do from no matter what vantage point they come from, including the technology person. Is it Barbara who's on the phone call, to understand, from just such a variety of different organizations, that this is important work.
I think that as we all look at this, and our board, it's really doing some deep work around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we deepen the work that we're doing into the marginalized communities. This is hard work, and raising funds is hard work. And as you know, a director wears a lot of different hats, but our board is really looking at advocacy, and I think this is a great time for us to partner together.
Wonderful. Well, so that's the second part of my presentation, where we want to go. And I just want to tell you, while I think we have some ways to go on our fundraising, I did want to let you know about some of the collaborations that we have that I think make this small organization a lot more powerful, if that makes sense. The first and foremost are our university partners. This year, I guess I could share my screen again. Let me share it and show you about this year's scholars. Here are our scholars. So we have one scholar, we did have two from NC Central University. We have one scholar from Duke. We have 2 scholars from NC State University. We have 1 from Chapel Hill. Did I say 1 from Duke? I'm sorry, I meant 2 from Duke. And those are our scholars this year. But as I scroll through, you can see the faces of the diverse group of young women who have been a part of our leadership training program. We're going in reverse chronological order here. And you could go on our website to look more. I just want to show you, you talked about diversity, equity, inclusion, and that's something we certainly, those words are certainly something we hold dear, but we've always held them dear. Look at the faces of our young scholars. They really span a variety of different ethnic origins, different racial identities, different sexual orientations, in a variety of ways. Our leadership training program, including, by the way, you can see one of my favorite people, Joel Tinkler, including a handful of men over the years, like the men on this call, who are committed feminists. And of that, we are also proud. But as you can see, most of the people who apply to be scholars in our leadership training program have, over the years, been people who identify as women. Anyway, enough of that for the moment. So let me tell you who we affiliate with. Our university partners, and as I mentioned, we are looking to expand our geographic focus there. Let me tell you about a 3-year-old partnership that I'm really proud of, and that is with the RTI's Global Gender Center. Some of you perhaps are familiar with this think tank in the park, and they have a Global Gender Center. And one of the first things I did when I came on board was try to professionalize, if that's the right word, the leadership training program. We, up until 3 years ago, we had community volunteers who served as our, what we called them then, mentors. We now call them femtors, to our university scholars. We now don't just have volunteers who were fabulous, and we've, nothing wrong with a smart person from the community working one-on-one with an undergrad. But these are social science researchers whose focus is on women's issues, partnering with our undergraduate students to produce serious, in-depth research, actionable research that will move the needle forward. So with that affiliation, that collaboration, we're very proud of. We also, as I said earlier, work with a variety of other community-based and statewide organizations. I mentioned ERA-NC, I mentioned the Council for Women and Youth Involvement that I used to that I was involved with, that I've maintained a relationship with. The Human Trafficking Commission, we did a whole lunch and learn on human trafficking in North Carolina and worked with the Human Trafficking Commission on that initiative. We've also worked with, although as I mentioned, we are not a women's shelter. We worked on our sexual assault lunch and learns with some local sexual assault and domestic violence agencies. But another collaboration that's it's sort of like the university collaborators, but not quite. And I want to point this out. Let's see if I can do a share screen and show you. Let me go to the home page and show you our news page. We're having a fundraiser coming up on December in Raleigh for those of you who are here, but I want to show you and highlight our work and our partnership with UNC School of Public Policy. We work with, if you're in UNC Public Policy School, you have to do either a capstone project or independent study or something like that in order to graduate. Under the direction of public policy professors, we have a group of students at least once a year, sometimes twice, who take on WomenNC and do a project, not under my direction, not under the direction of the Global Gender Center, but under the direction of UNC Public Policy. We've done such work as a more macro look at the status of women in Greensboro, the status of women in Pittsburgh. We've taken a more macro view, but that's a collaboration that we're really impressed with because they bring to the fore a group-oriented project. Ours are individually focused, as I mentioned, a one-on-one collaboration between UNC scholars and RTI's femtors. But we're very proud of UNC's, our partnership with UNC Public Policy, and wonder if there aren't some other kinds of affiliations we could make along that, whether it's Elon or NC State or Bennett College, to work on that level, if not with the Scholars Program. So that's what I think I'll stop there and say I'm really proud, not only proud, but as I said earlier, I think our collaborations make us a stronger organization than we otherwise might be. Our board too, as you all know all too well, is also a big contributor to our success, whether it's getting silent auction items for a fundraiser, whether it's recruiting additional board members, making those connections with our collaborators. We have a strong and diverse, I could show you that, but I'm not going to bother. You can go on our website. Our board doesn't look like me. We don't want it to, because most of the work that we are involved with does not involve women who look like me. Our scholars don't look like me. The objects of our research don't look like me. The objects of, or oftentimes the topics we address in our lunch and learns are not directed at privileged women like me. And so our board should not look like me. And in fact, they don't. And again, of that, I think it makes us a stronger organization. We hear different voices. We hear a variety of voices to help inform the work that we do. As a part of this last thing, I want to say, why would you want to collaborate with us? Susan's already said she wants to, but let me give you a few more reasons in case you're wondering whether it would be a good idea to sort of deepen and develop a partnership with us. We want to be in Alamance. That's real, and you are a great way to do that. So we want to be in Alamance. Secondly, we want more students involved in Alamance. To be in Alamance doesn't mean a darn thing if we're not looking into the issues and concerns that your community has. Sure, we can get students from Chapel Hill to do that. Sure, NC State scholars could do a project that focused on what's going on in Alamance County and surrounds. Better to have students, say, from Elon University, who are resident, whose faculty advisors are resident in the surrounding communities, do that work. So we would like to get more students from your community involved in the work that we do. And another reason that you might want to collaborate with us involves spreading the work, the good work that you are already doing. You mentioned you're going to put this up on your website or your YouTube channel. I can't remember. We have the same thing. We would like to spread the word of your organization to our constituency. We're another outlet, another venue to get the word out. We can offer that to you as we do with our other collaborators. So those are three reasons that I think you might want to continue to think about collaborating with us. And anyway, I think I will end by just saying that a lot of the work that we do, and I said this before, but I do think it's important. We're not a direct service organization. We need more of them probably. That is important work. We like to think of ourselves as thinking more long-term and more strategically about what women need, what we can do as an organization to advance gender equality across the state. And we think we do that with our three integrated programs that I mentioned earlier: the leadership training, the community education, and the sort of, I hate CEDA, I wish it had a better name. I've just decided in the last 48 hours to call it the Equal Cities Initiative or something like that. Because CEDA, you can't even say it. But everybody understands the idea of making city and county governments more representative and more accountable to women. That's an idea that doesn't need an acronym. And anyway, those are the three programs we use to further the mission. And so I think that's all I have right now. So I would love questions, comments, or violent objections.
Awesome presentation, Maria. Thank you so very much. So we would love questions from the folks that are on the call.
Hey, Susan, I've got a question for Maria. I was looking at your website and I'm always fascinated with young people and just how much energy that they have to just tackle the world. Um, I used to be like that too, I think.
We all did.
Um, some of their projects are just fascinating. Do you have a favorite project, that one that sticks out, or one or two that sticks out that just you think really have made a difference?
Yeah, I would. Thanks for that. And I should have mentioned that. So this is good. Questions are always good for helping people who didn't say everything they should have said, and bringing that to the fore. So I'll tell you about one that I am particularly proud of, because, and let me tell you, I'm not going to give you six, and but not only because of time, but because let me tell you, one of the difficulties, not only do we not feed the hungry and house the homeless, but as many of you know, the work of advocacy, changing the world, inspiring action, doesn't happen in one cohort year. And that's how long we have our students, for one school year. And policy change doesn't usually happen in that kind of a time frame. And so to be able to say, because a WomenNC scholar did that, North Carolina changed its law regarding this. Because a WomenNC scholar examined that issue, this happened, right? The connection, the causal connection is weak. But let me point you to one that I am proud of, that really my focus taking over was to work on, I said this, but let me highlight it: short-term, low-cost policy solutions to the problems they identified. Here's an example of a scholar who took that message to heart. A couple of years ago, a young woman from Duke, Amy Jang, you can look her up, but I found out right before we got on that the links aren't working, so you can't see her project, but let me tell you about it. Amy Jang from Duke. Amy worked with middle school students in Durham, where Duke is located, to help mentor them and work on getting their computer science and STEM credentials up to par in middle school. And she read a couple of articles that suggested that there was a dearth of women involved in the high prestige, high paying technology sectors that was literally in her backyard in RTP and surrounds. And she kind of shook her, what's that word? Scratched. I'm having a senior moment. Scratched her head and said, I wonder why that's the case. She worked with one of our femtors from RTI and said, well, why isn't it that there are more women in these fields? Well, one reason, not the only reason, but one reason is that many of these people are drawn from computer science majors, people who major in computer science, which she was at Duke. And she realized in her own career that there were very few women who were computer science majors at Duke. So she started to think, well, why are there so few women in computer science at Duke? And is that the same across, several universities that had data on that? Easy to find, actually. And in fact, it's true. Very few women computer science majors. Well, why is that the case? She went to Durham Public Schools and started talking to computer science teachers across that district. And what she came to find out was the following. While there are equal distribution in Durham Public Schools between women and men, young women and men who at the high school level take the inter-level computer science class, it's offered to freshmen, first years. I've learned that from my daughter. They're not freshmen, they're first years, freshmen. They're called first years and sophomores. The AP computer science classes were almost exclusively composed of men. And who were more likely than not to become computer science majors in college? People who had taken AP computer science in high school. Well, then she scratched her head again and said, well, why is it that women drop out after completing that first class in computer science and don't go on to the next level? And let me tell you the brilliant solution, or the brilliant conclusion she came up with. She's an undergraduate now. She's a senior at Duke a couple of years ago. She had absolutely no idea. She wasn't a subject matter expert. What she thought or who she thought might have a solution, were the computer science teachers in Durham Public Schools themselves. What she found out was that unlike, and those of you who have children probably know about these things called oh my God, I'm having a senior moment. Community learning. Oh my God, I'm just forgetting the name of it. In elementary school, all the fourth grade teachers get together to figure out how best to teach social studies to fourth graders. At the high school level, English teachers across the district, or at least across the building, get together to think about how best to teach Macbeth, let's say. Professional learning communities, sorry, had a senior moment there. PLCs, professional learning communities. Durham County Public Schools had them in math, it had them in PE, it had them in English, it had them in social studies. Guess what? There were no professional learning communities for teachers of computer science across the district. Amy's policy solution was to give computer science teachers release time in their teaching duties to talk with one another about how to recruit more students, women, other minorities to advanced computer science classes across the district. She said, this is why it's brilliant. I don't know the problem, but I do know who might. And my policy solution is to empower them. So she literally, this is before the time of COVID, marched into the superintendent's office of Durham Public Schools and said, I have an idea. And without much convincing, the superintendent, who was actually the assistant superintendent, said, yeah, that's a great idea. I've got a little bit of money. We can give teachers a once a month release time for them to meet as a group together to talk about, and I'm sure this wasn't the only thing they talk about, how to recruit and retain more women and minorities in computer science and elevate them to advanced computer science classes. That's a long-winded way of saying that's one of the projects that I am most proud of. Low cost, effective, and not a hard sell. Like, this makes sense and we can do it. It's not going to cost that much. So anyway, that's my answer to your question. Thank you so much for asking it.